here. Get this party started.
Let's do it.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everyone to this conversation that's going to be focused on navigating what's next. I'm Julie Winkle Giulioni, and I'm an author and consultant and speaker on a variety of workplace topics and issues, including retaining and developing talent. And that's why I am so excited about our topic today and about this conversation that we're going to get to have with my friend and colleague, the futurist and innovation coach, Robert Tucker. So I had the pleasure of meeting Robert at an author luncheon not long ago. So we're not long-term friends, but immediate friends during that event where he offered so generously to let me read an advance copy of his new book, Build a Better Future: 7 Mindsets for Navigating the Age of Acceleration. And I have to tell you, from the first chapter, I was just hooked because I really recognize this as a book that has the ability to usher in significant change, the kind of change that we really need right now. So, if you don't already know Robert, you are in for a treat. He's the author of 8 other books, including the bestseller Driving Growth Through Innovation. He has served clients ranging from governments in Dubai and Singapore to American Express and SAP. He's worked in 54 countries throughout his career. He's a frequent contributor to Forbes and has appeared on Bloomberg, on Channel News Asia, and the CNBC series, The Business of Innovation. And with his new book, Build a Better Future, Robert really addresses the issue of how we, as individuals, as parents, as citizens, consumers, leaders, can find our way in this turbulent, exciting, disruptive transition to what he calls the age of acceleration. So, welcome, Robert. How are you doing today?
Doing great. And Julie, I want to not only thank you for taking time out to be the moderator and keep me on track this morning, but I want to welcome all of our guests from really all over the world. We've got people calling in from Singapore, from Europe, and from all over the United States and Canada. And so a big, hearty welcome to everybody. I wish I could personally shake your hand. That's the only downside of this virtual world that we're living in. We can't touch, but we'll muddle through here.
Yeah,
So
well, let's all just put our hands out, and we'll virtually do our handshake
there you
here.
go.
Or if you're more of a hugger, you can hug.
I am both of those.
I know you are. Well, the beauty is we do, the virtual technology allows us to expand our reach and get as far as Singapore and beyond. So, agreed. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. All right. So, I've got a series of questions that I want to ask, but I also want to make sure that our guests and friends who are joining us have a chance to ask their questions as well. So, you may notice that there's a Q&A panel feature that's part of Zoom here down on your menu bar. So if you've got questions that occur to you throughout our time together this morning, please go ahead and capture them there. We'll keep an eye on that and be able to, toward the end of the session, have your virtual voice enter the conversation. So without further ado, let's get started. First question, as an author, I'm always curious about other authors' process, but in this case, I'm kind of curious about timing. So the book was 6 years in the making, and I'm just wondering, what took you so long? Why did we have to wait so long for this?
I think there's a lot of people asking that question. I certainly have asked it of myself. I'm not really sure, Julie, to be quite honest. 6 years zoomed by. There were a lot of things, incredible things that happened to society, to the world during that period. MAGA came about again for a second time, the COVID crisis, et cetera. I mean, it was just a very yeasty period, but I struggle with it. My process, we're both authors, my process is I've got to get away. I've got to get out of town, and so I'll go to someplace like, well, in this case, I went to Juneau, Alaska, where I'd once given a speech and just fell in love with this little town. And when I got there, it was like right as COVID was just sort of breaking. We were starting to get shots and feeling a little bit more confident. but I think I was the only non-resident in the whole town. It was very eerily quiet, deserted. But I just, what I would do, I just get down to business, and I would I'd take all these records, these articles, these books, and I would just, from the time I got out of bed in the morning till I couldn't stand it late at night, just trying to figure out what's going on, where are the trends going. And so this book had a lot of evolution to it. I mean, I could not get, as we say in the journalism business, I could not really get my angle straight. But finally, after going to Juneau and for a week, and Kern River, for an Avila Beach, Mammoth, and I finally sort of started to turn a corner on the book, in the sense that I figured out, what I'm really writing here is a handbook, a guidebook, to help people navigate the tumultuous, fast-changing, but also opportunistic times that we're living in. And so when I finally figured out what I was doing, it started really kind of coming together at that point.
Awesome. Well, and it's well worth the wait. No criticism at all. Well worth the wait. So let's talk about kind of what's at the center of the book, change. And it's been around forever, right? So what's different now?
Well, I think what's different now, Julie, is the rate of change, the sheer volume of change that's coming at us. My wife and I were just with two other couples on the Mississippi River on a cruise, and I was thinking about this webinar and the book and the promotional tour that I'm now on. And, it occurs to me that we are living in a time when 8 or 10 or 12 Mississippi rivers are all kind of converging at the same time. And they're coming toward us, whether we like it or not, whether we're prepared or not. And so I started, really thinking about that. And what I have sort of seen is that change is no longer linear. It's become exponential, like a hockey stick. It's just going straight up. And if you look, for example, at how much money is going into AI, I mean, Facebook alone is investing $100 million in AI, and that's just one company. And so as a futurist, what I do is I say, where is this trend going to be 10 years out? And then beyond that, what are the implications of that? We can get into this a little bit, but I think these multiple trends, this confluence of what I call mega forces of change, all coming at us at the same time, is the differentiating factor.
Yeah.
Because as you say, we have always had change.
Yeah. And the visual of these rivers coming together is really powerful. And when these bodies of water come together, you've got, kind of the white water and whatnot, that I think probably contributes to what you refer to as this historic inflection point
Right.
that we're at. In the book, you talk about, we've moved from the familiar agricultural, industrial, and information ages into what you refer to as the acceleration age. So, what exactly does that mean?
Well, I call it the acceleration age because it's not just the digitalization age. There are so many megatrends and megaforces that are not directly connected to that. I mean, it's a dominant one, I would say, but there are social trends, there are political trends, there are economic trends. And I honestly think that, well, what I say in the book is this. There will be more change in the next 10 years than there has been in the prior 100 years. And that may seem like, wow, kind of a mouthful, kind of something that's difficult to get your arms around. Really? But if you think about it, I mean, there's already been more political change in 1 year, not even 1 year, than perhaps in the past 100 years or 200 years. And we're facing accelerating social change, demographic change. I mean, look at, let's just drill down in that one just for a moment so people can kind of understand what we're talking about here. But demographic change is everything from immigration or non-immigration to birth rates. Look at the birth dearth that's going on right now. Look at, the aging of America. I mean, on this particular cruise that we were on the Mississippi there, I can't tell you. I mean, the demographic was probably, the average age was probably 75 to 80. And that's what we're seeing. And we're going to see more and more of that. So those folks are going to need different services, more services, and so forth. But, I think the overall impact, Julie, of this whole thing is that people are feeling overwhelmed. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, liberal, whatever background you have. I think people are just generally. I got an email from a good friend in Bend, Oregon, not too long ago. And she said, Robert, she said, I really welcome your book. I sent her a manuscript and she read it. And she said, I've been feeling so overwhelmed lately. She said, I'm appalled and overwhelmed by what is happening politically, environmentally, socially, spiritually. And you look across the board at what's happening. I mean, the old ways of operating, the assumptions that we made about how to operate, how to be successful, they're just flying out the window. The institutions that have supported us, the family institution, for example, our government institutions, our NGOs, our non-government organizations are just reeling from the amount of change that they're being asked to deal with. Government shutdown, lack of funding, a decrease in their funding. These things are hitting people really, really super hard. I think that's why you saw in the election yesterday, there's a real repudiation of the direction that we're taking here. But that's another topic. But I mean, just look at the amount of uncertainty and disruption. If you're a business leader today, how do you plan in this environment? How do you do long-term planning, strategic planning, when you can't really know whether the tariffs will be on or they'll be off, or whether the regulatory environment for you will be favorable or unfavorable, depending on perhaps your political predisposition. But let me also say this, because I really do believe it with all my heart, and that is that in periods like this, there is incredible opportunity as well. Because in periods of time like this, leaders, people who are able to navigate the future, who are able to see the future, are going to be those that really not only survive, but they prosper, they flourish, and they help other people to do the same.
Yeah. And in your book, you really hit hard on the fact that anyone can realize the hope of the situation and ride the wave. No matter who they are, where they are, what they do, what stage of life they're in, if they're willing to figure out, how their job is changing.
Right.
So say a little bit about that.
Right. Well, you can't have been a professional speaker and bopped around as you and I have for 30 years without just walking in the shoes of all kind of different populations, different companies. I mean, one day I'll be working with a group of IBMers. The next day it might be small business people in machine tool environment or some. I mean, it's just been a very, very exhilarating journey, a fascinating journey, because you have to, in order to be an effective speaker and to help people get where they want to go, not where you want to take them, but where they want to go, you really have to walk in their shoes. So I started thinking about this and how everyone's job has changed, right? I mean, if you're a parent, let's just take that. Wow, it's so much more difficult to be a parent now.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's be a little bit pointed about this. I mean, do you sit there and just go with the flow and let your kid sit in their room playing video games for hours and on end, or do you encourage them to get out there and breathe some fresh air and take some risks? Sometimes that's difficult. You'll get some pushback. If you're a student, do you let Chat GPT write your term paper? Hey, it's easier, get it done. But you could also realize that, hey, that's a mistake because you're not going through the process of figuring out what you think, what you believe, how you research, how you get to the sources. And you see, in doing that, not only do you become a better student, but you become a human being, a fully realized, actualized human being. So don't let technology rob you of that experience.
Mm.
It's like peeling the onion, if you will. If you're a retired person on this call, I've got news for you. Your job has changed. There's this thing called the longevity revolution. And guess what? You've probably got 30 extra years of life. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is you better figure out meaning and purpose because you know what? The days are pretty long. And if you're just sitting around, you're not going to really realize that. And I think the other aspect of that is how are you going to serve other people? How are you going to give back? You've had a great life, but what are you going to do to give back to other people in their journey? And if you're a grandparent, I mean, I think your job has changed as well. You have the unique challenge of not just giving in to this notion that the best days are behind us, that, hey, we lived in a good period and you're basically not, haven't. When I look at my 8-month or 9-month-old granddaughter, I mean, she's just precious. And I can't help but think about the future when I'm playing with her and interacting with her. Because do I want to leave her a troubled, a polluted world and just tell her, well, there's nothing we really do about this. This is just the way things are.
Yeah.
So I get pretty motivated about that, as you can see.
I can hear that. And, just with every sentence, I see another webinar spinoff here, another conversation, because there's just so much richness here. But stepping back for a sec, you've said this phrase a couple of times, and it's used frequently in your book. It's the phrase mega force of change. And I have to say, when I first heard it, when I first read it, it's a little ominous. I mean, it sounds like kind of the troops that Darth Vader might send our way. Um, but you write about these mega forces in the book, and I wonder, could you, for the folks who are on the line, define what it means, and maybe share an example of a mega force?
Yeah, I would say, a mega force of change is any force, whether demographic, social, economic, political, regulatory, or what it could, consumer, whatever, that has a major impact on society and has a major impact on us. You and I live in Southern California, so a mega force that we're both dealing with is climate change. And we have a choice. We can ignore it and hope it'll go away. But I mean, hey, just look at what's been happening here. Whole towns, Paradise, California, burned to the ground a couple of years ago. Lahaina, Maui, Hawaii, burned to the ground. And just earlier this year, Julie, Los Angeles, 18,000 homes. So it's what we do with these megaforces. It's what we do about these mega forces of change that will really separate whether we're navigating successfully in this topsy-turvy era that we're entering or whether we're just along for the ride.
Mhm. So yeah, let's turn our attention there to the what we do toward the solutions.
Yes.
And we do not have to look any further than the 7 mindsets that are at the heart of building a better future. And these are the mindsets that you say anybody can use to navigate the whitewater rapids that are ahead.
Right.
And so we're going to dig in. I'd love to dig into a few of them, starting out with the preparedness mindset. Winkler,
Right.
could you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, first of all, a mindset is a sort of mental orientation. It's the way we condition our mind to approach something, to approach new ideas, change, whatever. And so the preparedness mindset is it's not about stocking up on canned goods or active shooter drills or contingency plans. I mean, it is important to do those things, but it's really about paying attention, having your antenna up, when there's a change coming at you, when you're first noticing a change. And, asking yourself, is this a signal? Is this something very important that I should pay attention to? Or is this just more noise in the environment? So I think that's a real distinction there. And if I could just give you an example of somebody, may I give you an example of somebody who really, is very much embodies this megaforce? It would be this guy named Andrew Smith. We talk about him in the very first chapter, Julie, of preparedness mindset. So if you go back to your experience with COVID, I don't know what your experience was, but I think for most of us, it was like a period of great anxiety and great fear. How will I can I avoid contacting this virus and so forth? And so Smith at that point was with this school district, the Rowan, what is it? The Rowan Gibson Salisbury, North Carolina school district. And so he's in charge of strategic planning. He's in charge of, helping them to wade through this COVID emergency. And he told me, for the first couple of days, we were just going around in circles. We were getting nowhere because everybody was just reacting. Everybody was emotional. And he said, look, hey, because of perhaps my training, I went to my boss and I said, I need to have some time off. And he actually took 2 days off to clear his mind, to think, to read up on whatever he could read up on this crisis. And I think what he did just sort of differentiates him and his preparedness mindset. I mean, it was sort of brilliant. He not only did he request time off, but during that period of time, he remembered a course that he had taken at Johns Hopkins, where there was this risk analysis profile. And he came back and he immediately got people going to work in a whole different direction. He surfaced every one of their anxieties, every one of their scenarios. What's possible? What's possible here? And he got them all out on the whiteboard. And then he introduced this tool to where they were able to start making progress. And they ended up very much being prepared and to help these kids to be safe and the families and so forth. So it was a really telling story when I interviewed him for Forbes, and I put much of that into the book.
Yeah.
Great example of that.
I love that story so much. I mean, it's just such a great example of, going slow so you can go fast, that
That's
kind
right.
of preparation. So totally sold on this idea. So a little, coaching, if you would. What specifically can I do, as an individual, the next time I'm facing a crisis, like he might have, to build my own preparedness mindset?
Great. Yeah, actually, it's what you do prior to the crisis that really matters the most. I think one of the biggest things that we can do to help ourselves to prepare and to be in that sort of preparatory mindset is to what I call audit your information diet. You see, there's so much information coming at us today. It's just overwhelming. So you've got to have a strategy for how you inform yourself, for how you track the trends, for how you monitor change, for how you go about separating the signal from the noise and the fad from the trend, if you will. That's sort of the secret sauce here for people who are what I call tomorrow builders, people who are good navigators, people who will be so essential and so helpful and so effective in this next 10-year period where we're going to be hit by, as I say, more change in the next 10 years than we have been hit with over the last maybe 100 years, maybe even more than that. Yeah. The big thing about reinforcing your information diet, you got to take, and we go into this in the book in more detail, but you've really got to take a look at, are you getting the nutrition or are you just getting some junk food here, basically? If you're skimming and scanning and, looking around on social media and seeing what the talking heads have to say about this and that, you're probably wasting your time. It's easy to waste your time. I want to encourage everybody on this call to make your information intake matter. And that means deep reading. We're losing the art of deep reading because we're grazing and we're flitting here and there. I mean, I do it. It's so easy to fall into that. Yeah. But when was the last time you sat down with a book? You closed off all of the technology around you and you just deeply read that book. I would invite you to read my book that way, because I wrote it to be read that way. And people are telling me, I'm getting so much feedback. People are telling me, wow, I got into this thing and I really found a lot of meat in there, a lot of ideas in there about how to manage the future.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. It really is a nice parallel to junk food that tastes good, but doesn't carry the nutritional value that the apples and the whole foods and the deep reading can offer. Love
Exactly.
that. Love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have mentioned a couple of times, and I think it's worth maybe pausing and spending a little time on this about technology.
Yeah.
And there's certainly plenty of it coming our way at in a volume and rapidity that's unparalleled. How do we counteract the challenges and the risks that are associated with this trend, that we're seeing around robots and AI and technology taking more and more jobs and functions within the workplace?
Well, great question. And I would say this, that one of the things you want to do with this technology trend, when you see all of these companies just investing massively in AI, is to think 10 years out and ask yourself, where is this trend going to be? So just imagine 10 years out on technology. And I'll give you an example of where things are going. A friend of mine was stranded in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport for about 8 or 9 hours just recently. No single human being from the airline, American Airlines, I'll give a name here, ever came to the gate. And all of the information that they kept getting was basically wrong. It was not accurate. She tried contacting the airline. She got some chatbot responses that were useless. And she used that to actually write a blog about it, because that seems to be the way things want to go here. And I think it's very dehumanizing. The sum total of where we're headed here is dehumanizing. Now, I happen to be someone who values humanity. I consider myself a humanist. So I don't think that's a very good direction overall. But it's where the Mark Zuckerbergs, it's where the Elon Musks and all the technology folks in Silicon Valley are just driving the bus. Mm-hmm. They're not concerned about the implications of this amount of technology arriving this rapidly. And they're glossing it over, they're sugarcoating it like good salespeople always do, the negative aspects of this. So while I use ChatGPT all the time, I use technology all the time, I'm not anti-technology, but as a futurist, I am very concerned about the net effect here of dehumanization. We're already starting to see this in the absolute vacuousness of so many people. I hate to say it that way, but that's what's occurring. That's the offshoot of this whole thing. Brain rot is the new word of the year by the Oxford Dictionary, by the way. It's a state of mind where people can't think, they can't reason, there's no critical thinking ability, they can't read a couple of paragraphs and tell you the key idea in that. And if we project that trend ahead 10 years or even 5 years, it's not a pretty sight. So I think in this world, the futurists can be very valuable to society, but not if they're just a rah-rah, oh, wow, isn't AI going to be so great? Because there's just been too many examples of how a technology was introduced, and oh, this is going to really give us all this productivity. It's going to give just be the greatest thing. I mean, life is just going to, and it ends up being a mixed bag. I mean, social media perhaps is the biggest example of that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah, I love this 10-year test, that 10 years out test that you've got here, because it really has just, such implications for,
and Julie, if I could just jump in there,
yeah.
we don't have 10 years. I mean, between 2011 and 2015 in the United States, I don't know about other countries, but in the United States, millions of young people, 13-year-old teenagers that got smartphones. Before that, they had to go on mom and dad's computer, the family computer. And then they got social media at the same time. And what happened? Jonathan Haidt has been, with his books, have been really sort of changed our society, our perspective on this whole thing. He wrote a book, a wonderful book that I strongly recommend called The Anxious Generation. And rates of suicide and teenage cutting and all of these untoward effects occurred. But you see, the technologists, they don't really know how to even comment on this. So they just ignore it, right? But we have to get more pointed and more conscious about the implications of technology,
Mhm.
where it's taking us.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm really seeing that we each have a responsibility to become sort of personal futurists. Um, and it makes me think about, in the book, you talk about this notion of predicting and forecasting,
Mm-hmm.
because you point out we need both to make good decisions, given how
Right,
quickly things are changing and shifting and the flux that we're experiencing. So I
right.
wonder, can you help us understand sort of the distinction between these two things, predicting and forecasting, and why it matters?
Sure. Yeah. The fact is that we're doing both all the time. You and I are making around 35,000 decisions a day, and they're based on predictions, right? I mean, they're based on the prediction whether we're investing, whether we're looking at a potential marriage partner, whatever it happens to be. We're basing that decision on a prediction that this will go well, that this will, is something we should do. And so I think we need to understand the difference there between prediction and forecasting. So prediction is basically saying, Julie, in 10 years, I predict that you'll be 10 years older. That's a pretty safe one. That's a pretty safe bet. So that's unlike most. A lot of my fellow futurists, and God bless them, they make a name for themselves by predicting. For example, Ray Kurzweil has gotten a very huge following, predicting that the singularity will occur. I think he's now saying in about 2028. Don't hold me to that. But that is the period when, or the point when, machines will become smarter than humans. And so more power to them, right? But most predictions, as the research shows that we talk about in this book, most predictions are, pretty inaccurate. I mean, economists have predicted like 8 or 10 of the last 3 recessions, as the old joke has it. But so we can predict, and it's important to do that. But I think it's more important to forecast, to assign a probability. And that's what the weather reporters, the meteorologists do all the time. And so we look at decisions that we make and we say, what is the percent factor of accuracy that I have around this particular thing? And if it's very low, then we might want to sort of hedge our bet. If it's a high degree of prediction accuracy that we believe in, then we might want to go ahead with that decision. But I think we need to kind of unbundle those two in order to have what I call an anticipatory mindset, to always be thinking about the future. And I think this is easier for some of us than others. I'm married to a woman that is always thinking about the future. Before she gets out of bed in the morning, she's looking at the weather, and tend to be just naturally a little more reactive, even though I'm a futurist. I'm just naturally more reactive. I think it's the way we're raised. But she'll be on the phone talking with maybe a family member about our trip 6 months from now to Hawaii, and she'll be saying, I wonder if we should go to the luau on Tuesday night, and I'm going like, oh wow, my family, hey, it's Friday night. Let's go to the drive-in movies, and so it's just a different frame of mind there. But I think it takes all kinds of people in this world.
Yeah, yeah. I love your wife already. She and I are going to be fast friends here.
She's great.
And let me just remind everybody who's joining us, you have an opportunity to ask your questions as well. I'm sure as you're hearing Robert talk, I mean, there are just probably tons of directions your mind's going. So please, if you've got any questions for Robert, put them in the Q&A that you'll find on your toolbar there, and we'll get to as many as we have time for. So, Robert, you were saying, the world needs all different kinds, which means we probably need to be adaptable. And it's such a big word right now. It seems like, everywhere you turn, we're in conversation around adaptability. So I wonder, can you talk a little bit about what we need to know about your mindset that focuses on adaptability?
You bet. Yeah, it's a big issue. It is probably one of the critical survival skills that we'll need for this next decade to be able to know when to adapt and perhaps when not to adapt. And we can talk a little bit about that too. Um, I think, to sort of boil down my career here, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of industries and even companies that, were in the crosshairs of disruption. They didn't see it coming. Their antennae were faulty. It's easy to have happen, but if you look at the history of the world, you see where the dinosaurs, the proverbial dinosaurs. There was apparently a meteorite that hit Earth in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, if you can believe that, and just wiped out the dinosaurs pretty quickly right after that. But I mean, these companies, these companies that we often talk about, where did Sears miss the boat because they didn't adapt? Where did Nokia miss the boat? Kodak, right? We were in Europe just, oh gosh, a couple of months ago, and we came upon this little old rusting sign that said Kodak. And I remember when I first started going to Europe back in the 70s, perhaps. I mean, tourists just dropped in to get film everywhere. So it's a different world out there. But you ask yourself, we have a Sears that closed here in Santa Barbara where I live, and I drive by there and I go, gee, why didn't they adapt? Why didn't they just put that catalog? They had the address of every American practically. I mean, growing up on a farm in South Carolina, it was like, wow, the Sears catalog arrived, and you'd look through there and you'd order new boots and whatever you order, Why couldn't they just put that online and make a go of it? But it's a little more complicated than that. It's just a matter of we're so busy doing the present that we can't see where our world has shifted. I worked with Nokia, and I think it was like 2006. Don't hold me to that. But these were the best and the brightest. They were meeting in Palo Alto. They were flying in from all over the country, or all over the world, actually. And Nokia was just minting money at that point. They were making money hand over fist. They were growing by leaps and bounds. They were like number 8 on the Business Week list of most innovative companies. And my goodness, what a privilege, to be invited to do a session with these groups. So I did something that I sometimes do before an event like this, a corporate event. I will do a survey. And one of the questions on the survey, I'll never forget it, was, what are the barriers to innovation at the Nokia Corporation? And I half expected that they would leave that one blank. Hey, we're Nokia, man. We don't have any problems. We don't have those kind of barriers that other companies have. Instead, I got back such things as we're risk averse. We, management in Espoo, Finland, tends to, just quash all new ideas, et cetera. All the usual suspects for those of us who are in this particular field. All of the things that hold back innovation. Well, this was kind of a weird thing. I remember getting there and doing the session, and I asked the group. I said, if I work for you and I have an idea, what do you want me to do with it? Do I know have you spelled out what you want me to do with it? And one guy raised his hand and he said, I would just tell you to forget about it. You're just going to frustrate yourself in this company. You're never going to get anywhere. And I've got to admit, there were a few gasps. People were like, whoa, we're revealing this to a thought leader outside the company. But I got the impression that, wow, yeah, that kind of describes my area too, my impression of this company. And it was 1 year later, Julie, that Apple introduced the iPhone, and Nokia began their spectacular fall from grace. And that was a spectacular example of lack of adaptation.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that companies face, because there are going to be so many options, so many voices telling you, we got to churn this, you got to go this way, you got to go that way, you got to adopt this, you got to do this. And you really need to, as the leader of your organization, take the time to do the process. I know we have some people on the call from a very important NGO. I won't mention their name, but they are going through this process right now. And I wish them well in this process. This is a very important NGO in the area of disaster rebuilding. And so I'll leave it at that. But okay. Yeah, that's it's going to be so important.
Let's definitely send some good energy in that direction for
You
sure.
bet.
So, Robert, you wrote down, you see this as being a critical survival skill. So, no doubt, adaptation, being able to intelligently adapt is clearly important. But I wonder, are there times when we also need to kind of stand our ground?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Joey, because there are absolutely times when we need to stand our ground, when we need to kind of push back. I gave a commencement address at my alma mater not too long ago. And one of the things that I emphasized in that commencement address was the need to basically push back. When something violates your values or is a threat to the common good, don't go along with it. Don't go along with it. That's my suggestion. Don't capitulate. Don't sell out. Don't sell out your values. You will regret it later. I'm guaranteed. I am genuinely saddened by the capitulation that we're seeing right now on the part of some business leaders, law firms, universities that have caved into political pressure. I think that history will not look kindly upon these moves. I mean, I understand it, but listen, if your DEI program was something that you told your people you believe in, that's diversity and inclusion. Do you still believe in diversity and inclusion because you're getting political pressure on that? You and I were in a meeting just not too long ago where we had one of our colleagues does a lot of work in DEI, and she had just come back from this conference. She's Asian, and she'd come back from a conference of Asian American professionals. And she told us, there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of fear out there, she said. And we were asking her, well, what's going on? And she said, well, all of our sponsors this year just completely evaporated. And even our major sponsor, a tech company, Oracle, I'll go ahead and admit it, they did not want their logos on any of, and in the years past, everything was Oracle all over the place. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's capitulation. That's letting somebody else tell you how to run your company and what your values should be. That's political pressure. And I just strong, I mean, one of the things that I do is I read a lot of history. I'm reading about Dietrich Bonhoeffer right now, the German pastor who resisted the Nazis. I'm being very much inspired by that. So yeah, I could go on this, but I shan't. But I mean, I just feel very strongly on that.
Yeah.
Go with what your values are and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm almost feeling like, this flip side, almost of adaptability might have something to do with agency, and
Yeah.
I'm talking a lot about agency in the work that I do around career development.
Mhm.
So I'd be interested to hear how you see that kind of playing into another of your mindsets, the human agency mindset.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's define it first. Agency is our capacity to act intentionally. Back in the day, we used to call it motivation.
Mhm.
Can you get out of bed in the morning, very early and get going, even if you don't feel like it? Can you make yourself do the things that you really don't want to do? I mean, it really comes down to that. But agency is a big issue these days. Um, because we're making choices. We're making decisions a lot, but we're making choices and these choices then become us, right? And I had the great pleasure in my early career of starting out as a journalist, interviewing the great thought leaders of our time. And people like Dr. Jonas Salk, and I mean, just I don't want to start name dropping here, but physicists and astronauts like Edgar Mitchell, and one of the people that I interviewed was strongly influenced by was a guy named Dr. Dennis Waitley out of San Diego, and had a audio program back then, a program called The Psychology of Winning, and it was all about how we self-talk to ourselves 24/7, 365. We're always talking to ourselves, even in our dreams. And I interviewed him, and he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, I asked him about, what are the common traits of these extraordinary winners that you write about and that you research? And he said, Robert, I think it's their understanding of how much control their thoughts have over their actions. He said, whether they are astronauts or parents or prisoners of war, they take responsibility. They don't let life happen to them. They make it happen for them. He said, the deepest freedom that we can exercise is the freedom of choice, the freedom of how we choose to think. And that to me, it says it all, because I think so much of all of this social mediaization that's going on robs people willy-nilly of their agency. They don't realize it, but if you watch TikTok for 7 hours every day or 4 hours, whatever the current measure is there, it just leaches out your ability to go out there and make it happen, to make mistakes, to take risks, to pick up the phone and call somebody, to do things that create the reality that you want to live in. So I'm really, really big on that. I think it's a very important one of these mindsets that we need to nurture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it doesn't even take 7 hours. I was just reading something. 30 minutes of scrolling inspires the ick factor. That feeling of you look down and you realize I've just spent a half an hour of my life on this. Ick.
Yeah, the ick factor, huh? Okay.
Yeah. So this is great. The idea of exercising this kind of freedom that you've described, it sounds good, but I want to reflect back on something you said earlier. There are a lot of people who are feeling beaten down and overwhelmed at
Right.
this point by all of what's coming at us.
Yeah.
So, what advice or techniques can you share with them around exercising this kind of freedom?
Sure. Well, I think as we were talking about here, just noticing our thought patterns, I think that it sort of starts there. Um, Maybe also having a few techniques. I think one of the techniques that's been effective for me personally is, let's say that I'm starting to kind of go off into kind of a mental funk, or that ick factor is starting to, happen, one of the things I force myself to do is just count to 10 and win. Count to 10. I think I learned this from maybe Dr. Robert Schuller or somebody, but okay, 10 things that are going right in your life right now. Okay, well, I'm married to a very wonderful person. I've got a wonderful granddaughter, and you just start, and it just starts shifting your conscience. And so we are living in a time when all this negativity is coming at us. Um, and we just need to really be aware of our mental environment and what's going on and how that's being affected by that mental environment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you.
You bet.
I want to kind of keep an eye on the clock here because we've got
Yes.
limited time,
Yep.
so much to cover, and we've got a couple of great questions here that I think we want to make sure that we get to.
Absolutely.
And it kind of speaks to, sort of the focus on individual as well as organizational action. So maybe let's first start. I'm not sure who shared this question, but if I'm convinced that I see a megatrend developing,
Mhm.
what's the process that I should use to properly respond?
Right. So the proper way to respond to that is to use a framework that we talk about in the book called DITTO. It stands for direction, implications, threats, and opportunities. So, what is the direction of this trend? Well, in the case of AI, it's voluminous, it is faster than. So, what are the implications? That's often where you can really come up with some new findings if you probe into that, because the implications could be for you, it could be for your company, or your team, organization, but they're worth probing. The threats, that's maybe the trend doesn't threaten you, but maybe it threatens other parties, other populations. And then, of course, the opportunities. And we haven't talked a lot about opportunity creation, but that's really been my entire focus with these companies that are wanting to drive growth through innovation. So, there are a lot of tools and techniques there, but I think it starts with the imagination. It starts by having a vision about uh, where we want to take our company or organization in terms of new products, new services, new directions, new markets. And, you get people to start exercising that realm, and you can take a trend and you can translate that trend. I know we have people on the call who've done exactly that. There is a company called Ageless Fitness, which is busy franchising all over the country, but they saw the demographic wave. They started here in Santa Barbara. They see the demographic wave, this longevity revolution. They see where affluent older people want to be healthier in their lifespan, and they have special needs as people in their third trimester, and so they are capitalizing on that particular market. But just going through this process, DITO, I can't tell you how much good feedback we have had on that particular tool. It's a relatively new tool, and it sort of takes the place of that tool from the 60s, whose name I SWOT, where strengths, weaknesses, threats, opportunities, weaknesses. So anyway, yeah, it's an important tool. I hope that people will think about using that tool. You are, for some reason, Julie, you got muted there.
It's because I muted myself. Yes.
Okay. How about that?
Ditto is such a powerful tool, and you describe it really nicely in the book. Emmanuel has a question, and it's sort of the flip side of that. So individuals can take action, but what about, leaders in organizations that want to future-proof those organizations? And Emmanuel asks about daily or weekly habits or practices that you might recommend to stay curious and forward-thinking.
Well, one of the things that I recommend doing, maybe not daily or even weekly, but frequently, is are all things considered meetings. And so you have to bring something interesting to talk about to the meeting, something that you've been noodling on, something that a trend maybe that you're concerned about. And then you get to discuss that trend, and everybody kind of puts these on the table. So it's not a meeting for action taking, like running through an agenda like we would normally do. But then the question that might come out of that, at least with certain of these trends, is let's use the Ditto framework on that to see if there's an opportunity hidden within this, what seems like maybe a negative trend sometimes, to where we can capitalize on that. I mean, the company, one of the companies we talk about in the book, uh, is a company that looks at the climate change trend, and they started a company to based on that. I won't necessarily go into the details on that, but there are opportunities in trends, whether they are negative trends or positive trends. And so these kinds of daily or weekly practices, I think on a daily basis, you want to say to yourself at the end of the day, what did I learn today that surprised me, shocked me, that concerns me, that I need to do more research on? Because this is a day-to-day thing. This is not, the changes are happening so rapidly today that we really have to zero in on the changes that are happening beneath our noses, not so much before our eyes, if you will.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I love that sense of curiosity and real discipline of mind that's required to sniff it all in and make sense out of it. We've got more questions than time allows, but there are a couple of things around deep reading resources. And Troy, love your question and thoughts around the role of tradition in terms of sorting all of this out. In the 3 minutes that we have, we aren't going to be able to do those justice. And so I think, Robert, you've got a plan to follow up with those who are on the call to be able to answer anything that's unanswered. But I
That's
want
right.
to just give you a moment here because we've covered so much great ground. And I wonder, bottom line, what happens when we begin to live these mindsets that you've described in Build a Better Future?
Build a better future. Well, yes, I think one of the first and foremost things that happen is you stop worrying. Worry is a negative use of the imagination. So I don't want anybody to worry about the future, including climate change, right? Um, I want people to feel empowered to take action about the future. In a sense, I mean, to build that better future for yourself, to visualize where you want that future to go. So critically important. I wish we had more time to explore that, maybe in a future call, but it's so important to just let your imagination go because dreams do come true. I live in a home, I won't get into all this, but I mean, I could tell you how this has worked in my own life very, very effectively. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, beautiful. So I gotta say, Robert, and we could do this for another hour or several more hours in future sessions, hopefully. But this has just been such a rich discussion about not just the fast changing landscape, but what I love are the actionable steps that anybody can take to literally build a better future. So thank you for this.
Well, Julie, I can't thank you enough for hosting today. I mean, you've done a terrific job here of keeping me on course, and I hope that folks have gotten great value out of it. I've certainly had a lot of fun. So,
I am confident that they have. And if
okay.
you all have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, and you want to learn more, there are so many ways to make that happen. First, you can buy Robert's latest book, Build a Better Future. It's available at all your favorite booksellers as well as Amazon. He's got a wonderful newsletter and he's just starting a LinkedIn community. So if you follow him on LinkedIn, you'll be able to hear the latest and greatest on all of his happenings, being able to tap into the deep wisdom that Robert brings. So with that, it's my pleasure to say thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Robert, for a wonderful conversation. And best of luck to you as this new book changes the world.
Thank you so much, Julie, and everybody.
Thank you all for joining us. There are just a few people still signing off, it looks like. So there's nothing we're going to say that's private and shouldn't be heard by others. So
Okay.
wonderful job, Robert.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much, Julie.
My pleasure. It was just a joy to be able to have this conversation. You made it so easy to do it. Did it turn out the way you had anticipated?
Absolutely. Yeah. And why don't I give you a buzz? Yeah, yeah,
Fair enough.
I'll give you a call.
Okay, sounds good. Before we log off,
Yeah,
though,
absolutely.
let's make sure, Brandy, do you have the questions that weren't answered from the
Oh, yeah,
question
yeah.
pod?
I took screenshots.
Oh,
Beautiful.
okay, okay.
Okay, and did you see that late breaking one that came in?
I did.
Okay, beautiful. All right, sounds good. I'll stand by.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Julie.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Joe.
thanks. And thanks, Brandy. You're marvelous.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.